Welcome to the Higher Ed Athletics Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mike Hill, the Charlotte Athletic Director. Mike, thanks for being on the Higher Ed Athletics Podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Travis.
Well, so I say Charlotte, and we'll get into branding and everything in a little bit. That is part of the North Carolina system, so UNC-Charlotte. And can you maybe just tell us a little bit just about size-wise of your institution? Because I don't think that people realize how big UNC-Charlotte actually is, because they just look at it being a athletic department brand, but it's really one of the bigger institutions in the system, right?
It is. In fact, we're the second largest university in the state of North Carolina now. We just crossed the 30,000 mark threshold for enrollment in the fall for the first time. So second in enrollment, only behind NC State. And we're the fastest growing institution in the 17 school UNC system, which is pretty remarkable. I believe over the past decade, our single institution at UNC-Charlotte has been responsible for almost 50% of the entire system's enrollment growth. So this is a university that's absolutely exploded, especially over the past decade, and it's still growing. I expect us to push towards 35,000 over the next few years. This institution was for many years a commuter school. It's no longer a commuter school. If you come to our campus, the first thing you notice is that it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it's green space and trees and red brick and beautiful facilities and buildings. It's a stunning campus, and we have 6,000 plus students who live on campus now. I think another 10,000 students that live within a mile of campus at off-campus, apartments. So this is not a commuter school the way maybe a generation ago might have thought it as. And it's exciting to be a part of a place that has such incredible growth and so much potential given the size and scope of our institution.
Yeah, I would just like to mention that the UNC system they have a lot of Division I schools too, and I don't think people realize. I think there's like 9 or 10 D1 institutions in the system, and I made that point about the size because you've actually, I think, surpassed Chapel Hill's size of campus. I think North Carolina State's still ahead of you, but it's just such a large system. But speaking about your facilities, I love visiting college campuses. Whenever I'm in a city, I've gone through Charlotte a few years ago to your campus, as well as a couple of Division II institutions around the area. And the football stadium looks so comparable to the rest of the institution. I think that's what I love about the athletic facilities is the brick. It's just you all did a great job. Your school has done a great job of blending athletics and higher education. So it's one I appreciate, but it's a beautiful campus. So I wanted to start off the podcast by just talking a little bit about UNC-Charlotte. So thanks for kind of that profile.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And we've had great leadership on this campus. We would hate to not acknowledge the chancellors who have impacted those decisions. And also my predecessor, Judy Rose, who was the athletic director here for 28 years and started football here and really is responsible for a number of the athletic facilities, both their construction and their funding through fundraising. And Chancellor Phil Dubois, who hired me, he retired this past year, was here when football began. And in the end, he and the board made the decision to place the football stadium right in the center of campus. So as you said, when you drive through our campus, that's one of the first things you notice is there's a beautiful vista of the stadium as you pull in, and it matches and fits in just beautifully.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about your predecessor because you entered the job as she was retiring after nearly 3 decades leading the department, I believe I read. So how does a new athletic director in that situation best approach the staff and eventually be able to implement your vision, listen to them too, and kind of come to a uniform vision after there really hasn't been change in leadership in 3 decades?
Well, it's a sensitive issue when you enter an organization that has been led by the same person for so long, because there were also employees here, staff members who had been with Judy for almost the entire length of her tenure. And so you recognize at the outset that there's some really strong bonds and connectivity to her. You have to respect the fact that they're dealing with a lot of emotion, dealing with that change and that the end of the relationship, in the sense that she's no longer leading the organization. They'll always be connected to Judy and care about her and be friends with her. But it's very unsettling, and change is hard for anybody. I feel like I had an advantage coming into that situation because I had experienced it as a staff member myself at the University of Florida, where I had worked for the better part of 2 decades when Jeremy Foley, our longtime athletic director, 24 years, retired. And that was several years ago now. It was probably 5 years ago now. But Jeremy retired, and many of us again had worked alongside him for the vast majority of his tenure as AD. And so we were very fortunate at Florida to bring on board Scott Strickland as our AD from Mississippi State. He'd been there for several years, his alma mater, to lead the organization. And I learned a lot from Scott those couple of years that I worked with Scott, because I saw how he dealt with us. And so I was on the other side, right? And I experienced that. And the amount of respect that he showed to the staff, I think just in an authentic and sincere way, was really, really special and impressive. And I took a lot away from that because there's always the fear that when you hire a new leader, a new AD is going to come in and quote unquote bring in their own people. And that was the last thing that I wanted the staff at Charlotte to fear when I came on board. And so I tried to establish that from the outset that, you're my people, and we're going to get to know each other, and we're going to work with one another. And you're here for a reason. There's a lot of talent here. I've heard great things about you. And so I don't want anybody to feel like they, are somehow on the outside looking in because the new AD is here. And, we established relationships really quickly. There's some great people here. Judy did an amazing job of building an excellent team. We had a few staff members who decided to move on. We had a couple of retirements, which happens. And then we also had, a few coaching changes, some of which were retirement, some which were decisions that we made, and those are never easy, but at the same time, it was part of the vision we have for the program to try to, really elevate everything to the highest level and a championship level. So, but I think that, again, dealing with a staff that's worked with the same person for so long, you have to have an awareness of that coming in, because no matter how good a job that you do in trying to establish those connections and those relationships, you're still not going to do things the way your predecessor did. You're a different person, and so. But I also think this, I have a ton of respect for Judy, and she and I have a great relationship. And I believe that because Judy and I have developed such a great relationship, that also helped the staff feel more comfortable with me because they really cared about Judy. And I think it was helpful for them to see that I cared about Judy and that I respect Judy and that it still involved Judy in so many of the things and the activities that we do here at Charlotte. So I think that to be inclusive is really critical when you're assuming a role of a position rather that has been occupied by someone else for so long.
Yeah, and I think you even have her listed as the emeritus AD on your staff directory, and I think I love whenever people do that with either their chancellor, their president, or their athletic director. It shows I think a gratitude or respect because you can see what they had done in their previous time there. So that's great advice for someone coming in. And, there's a lot of retirements going on in all over higher education right now after COVID. And we're to that stage where I think some people are going to want to pay attention to that advice. So I appreciate that. And you kind of alluded to your time at Florida and that you had spent about 25 years there before you became the athletic director at Charlotte. I'm always interested in career crossroads. So at what point did you have to make the decision of, I could either stay here for the rest of my career. I love it here. It's a very rewarding job. I'm sure you have family liked it there in Gainesville. I've been to Gainesville plenty. My brother-in-law is a graduate of UF. And so beautiful campus, great area. Or you decide, no, I want to go become an athletic director. What is that career crossroads like? And was it just because it was this specific institution, or were you already making kind of that decision that I want to lead in a department and understanding you had just gone through recent leadership change at UF that maybe opportunities would be a good time to look for them?
Well, I had always aspired to be an AD. I think as soon as I got in the field, even really before that, I knew that college athletics was the field I wanted to be in, and AD was the ultimate aspiration. But as I spent time at Florida, um, one of the things that I love the most about my experience is that over the course of my career, I continue to gain new responsibility, and I continue to learn, and I continue to grow through success and mistakes. And so I understood that I was at maybe the pinnacle of college athletics, or certainly one of the top 3 or 4 athletic programs in the country. And so for me, I was not willing to leave that for just anything. As much as I wanted to be an athletic director, I was not willing to just pick up and go somewhere else to have that title if it wasn't a place that I felt like I could thrive professionally and personally. And quality of life matters a lot to me too. Gainesville was a great place to live, and again, I was pretty selective, and there were, I would say, after about 16 or 17 years on the staff at Florida, opportunities started to present themselves to me to pursue athletic director job positions, and the vast majority of them I declined to even get involved with. There would be search firms that would contact me, and I would respectfully decline because, again, the institutions were fine institutions, but I didn't think were the right fit for me. I would say over the course of probably the last 6 to 7 years that I was at Florida, there were a small handful of AD jobs that I considered, that I got involved with. They were all Power 5 jobs. Actually, one of them was a Big East program. The other were Power 5, and great experiences getting involved. And that was a finalist for at least 3 of those positions, and serious finalist. And so got close, but didn't happen. And that was okay because, again, I was at Florida, so I had the best position in the world. If I got the job, great, and if I didn't, I was at Florida. So when the transition occurred and we hired Scott, Scott and I are friends. We've been friends for a long time, and I have a ton of respect for him. And there was certainly a desire, at a program like Florida, it's not common to hire someone to fill that role unless they've had experience being an athletic director. And Scott had great experience in the SEC running the Mississippi State athletic program, and had a ton of respect, I know, with Jeremy Foley and with others on our team. So I love working with Scott and for Scott. And honestly, Scott made it clear to me that I had a big role to play at Florida. He could not have been more respectful or more helpful, and to continue to give me opportunities to grow at UF. He also knew my ultimate aspiration was to be an AD. And so, when the Charlotte job opened up, quite frankly, I felt that this was worth exploring because, again, it checked both boxes for me professionally and personally. I'm from the Carolinas originally. I grew up just two and a half hours southwest of here in Clemson, South Carolina. My parents were born and raised in Charlotte. My grandparents lived here. I've got cousins and aunts and uncles here. I spent a lot of time in this city growing up as we visited family on the weekends. So I was intrigued about the personal aspect. I'd always hoped to get back to the Carolinas one day. But then professionally, the more I learned about the job, the more intrigued I became. And so it really ended up being the perfect fit, for me. And that's ultimately what you want. My family and I are extremely happy here. We love living in Charlotte. We live in the heart of the city in Uptown. I love my job. I've got amazing people I work with, coaches and administrators and cabinet. Our new chancellor, Dr. Gaber, is fantastic. So it's just, I'm one of the lucky ones. I was able to land an AD's job that I think was really perfect for me.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I think I read that you're an alum of UNC, right? So you really do have a strong background in the Carolinas, and so between Clemson and the Tar Heels and now 49ers. So that's just a great background story about a career crossroads. It just always interests me about how people get to these decisions, because it's not just a simple, like, I'm going to find an AD job. Like you actually put a lot of thought and actually turn down positions early on to go through them to kind of wait for the right fit. So I think that's a really good advice. Now let's stick with the Florida and Charlotte Power Five to a Group of Five, the resources and strategy. So coming from Florida to Charlotte, there's a difference in staff resources, staff size, and probably a smaller alumni donor base just because your institution is a lot younger, which obviously means you haven't produced as many graduates over the years and those the family generations of grads. Do the same strategies in marketing, fundraising, and revenue generation apply to a Group of Five institution as maybe that you were at Florida? Are there things you can pull, or is there have to be a different strategy using maybe some of the tools, the skill set that you had?
I think that you do have to use some different strategies, but again, one of the advantages that I saw in coming to a place like Charlotte was the city that's in our backyard. Incredible resources. This city is exploding. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the country. It's a young, vibrant city. Several headquarters of major corporations are based here. Obviously, it's well known as the second largest banking city in the country. So it was obvious to me, and also having studied what Judy Rose was able to accomplish. There are a lot of really good friends of the UNC-Charlotte institution who are not graduates, but who are major players in the city. And so, that's not always the case in the markets that you go to, depending on where your institution is located. We cannot rely solely on our alumni to support our program, again, because we are a young institution. We don't have the kind of generational wealth that's been accumulated yet. A lot of our graduates, again, are younger graduates who've not been able to, again, accumulate the wealth that's required to be able to give at the highest levels the way you would see at an institution like Florida. It doesn't mean we don't have any. We have some, and they've been very, very generous for sure. We don't have the volume, and so that's probably the biggest difference, I would say, between here and Florida. But at the same time, so you say, well, what advantages do we have that we didn't have in Gainesville? And again, this city offers so much to us. There are many, many people in this city with significant resources who want to help, who can help, and even if they're not graduates of our institution, and in this case, many of them are not, we are the hometown team, and so they may have graduated from an ACC school or an SEC school, what have you, but they also want to see the Niners succeed. And so we've been able to gain a lot of traction that way. I think, again, it's just a matter of time, before we're able to really continue to cultivate that giving at the levels that we would need to be a program like a Florida. But we're getting there in terms of the numbers. If you look at just our alumni, for example, there are 75,000 alumni that live within 1 hour of our campus. And that's not typical, right? Because we are in a major metropolitan area. And so people graduate from Charlotte and then they oftentimes settle here or stay here because there are jobs here. Whereas if you're in a smaller, more traditional college town, a lot of times they have to leave to go find work, and so we just feel that we have incredible potential here that we're realizing. We're working hard at it, and again, it's not the same as a Florida or Chapel Hill or Clemson, but I'll take our advantages any day over a lot of the other younger aspiring programs because of what we have at our disposal.
Yeah, the economic engine of university in a city is something I've been studying lately in my doctoral degree and a research interest of mine. And so that's why I reached out. I've been looking at Charlotte, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, the IUPUI. You have these schools that, an IU Bloomington where I work and I go to school at, we don't have a city there. We're an hour from the city. So that's why you've seen IUPUI grow a lot with their students and their offerings. Same thing with Madison, Wisconsin. It's a great area, but you have Milwaukee, it's a growing city, and then now in Charlotte. And so even though you're a younger institution, maybe not a Power Five institution for the athletics, but it seems like being the economic engine of the city is really attracting a younger base, but also employment, which can really, I think in the future, only help schools like yours. Would you agree?
Yes, I mean, you think about what we can offer prospective students, whether it's students or student athletes, the opportunity for internships, just or for job shadowing, entry level opportunities, and local businesses. They love having a major research university, right there in their home city, because you're tapping into graduates who are skilled, who are extremely bright, and so that's an advantage that we have. And I think what really speaks to it, in my opinion, is if you look at this past year in the middle of this pandemic, we're headed into the fall, and nobody really knew what enrollment might look like. Well, what did we do? We set a record for enrollment. We had a record in freshman class of 4,000. That never happened here before, and a record total enrollment of 30,000. How did we accomplish that in the middle of a pandemic? Well, I think it was helpful that we are located in a major metropolitan area. It's an attractive place to be, attractive place to live. We're becoming a more fashionable choice, I think, for high school graduates who are in this area, who say, you know what, I don't really have to go far away to get a quality degree and still have an awesome experience as a student, getting a quality degree, and also having great student life experience with the things that we can offer through our athletics program. So yeah, there's no question about it. I think that we have advantages that many don't.
One thing that I'm curious about, and I haven't looked at the demographics of your student body, but one concern I do have with athletic departments is trying to reach that non-traditional age college student at an at a, whether it's an IUPUI, a Charlotte, or a Kansas City, Milwaukee. These institutions that you're in the city, so you're naturally probably going to also get an older student that's non-traditional, that maybe is working full time. Has your athletic department given any notice yet, or picked up on that, as far as like, how do we reach that fan that's not a traditional student, that's not 18 to 22 years old?
Yeah, there's definitely a segment of our student population that fits exactly into the category you described. And that really speaks even more to sort of what the past constitution or makeup of our enrollment was, when this was more of a traditional commuter school. If people can't maybe work part-time, went to school part-time, but now that it is more of a residential campus, there's no doubt we have a large percentage of our undergraduate students who do fall in the 18 to 22-year-old category. So we certainly don't dismiss the older students but at the same time, you have to also respect the fact that you may have older students who are coming back to school or finishing their degree, who are working, maybe full-time, maybe have a family. They maybe don't have the disposable time to commit to athletics the way an 18 to 22-year-old student who's living in an on-campus residence hall does.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance. That it'll be interesting to see in the years after the pandemic how enrollment changes. But it's also incredible to see the growth that you set a record enrollment in the fall and during a pandemic, whenever a lot of people were worried that people are going to stop going to college temporarily, or go to the to community college to save even more money. And it sounds like they're really loving UNC-Charlotte to hit that 30,000 mark. Speaking of Charlotte, I want to talk about branding. So I've seen a trend in universities that are part of a system or a branch campus that has kind of gone away from the acronym and more to their city location for their branding. Is that a strategy? Was that intentional to start? Maybe, is it nationally being branded athletics as Charlotte, or is it also a local thing? How does that balance go? And how did that kind of fit into your whole overhaul of your brand? And maybe after that, just walk us through that brand. About a year into your position, you all launched a new brand awareness search, I guess you could say. Walk us through that too, please.
Sure. So our athletics department has actually been referenced as Charlotte for a long, long time now. Judy Rose, back about 20 years ago in the athletic department, made the decision with the support of the institution to start referring to itself as just Charlotte 49ers. And a large part of that was because there was just a tremendous amount of confusion locally, regionally, and nationally about who we are. You think about, you've got UNC Chapel Hill, you have UNC Charlotte, You have the College of Charleston. You have, there are all sorts of confusing sort of hyphenated names and acronyms, et cetera. And also, for a long time, this institution was known as UNCC. And so that's back when, Cornbread Maxwell led the 49ers to the Final Four in the late 70s before he went on to play for the Boston Celtics. So, just a lot of confusion about what our name was. And in the end, I think there was a strong desire. And I believe firmly it was the right move 20 years ago to start referring to athletics simply as Charlotte. But what we did is we tried to elevate that platform here just in the past year with a rebrand that we launched to further develop the connectivity to our city. And particularly with the mark that we use, the CLT mark, which is, you see it all over the city. It's certainly an airport code, but it's also, it's all over the city of Charlotte as sort of an abbreviation for the city name. We began what we call a brand assessment in early 2019 with no predetermined outcome. We really just wanted to get a sense of what the strength of the brand was locally and regionally. And then we were going to take that feedback and make some decisions as to whether or not we should in any way alter or change any of the physical representation of our brand, which is your logos, your marks, et cetera. In the end, it's always easier if you don't have to touch anything. But the brand assessment, which involved a lot of research, surveys, feedback from constituents, students, alumni, student athletes, coaches, faculty, staff, et cetera. The message was lukewarm at best about what our existing brand represented. And, quite frankly, when we started this journey here in Charlotte back in 2018, we talked about really trying to elevate the reputation and the brand. And, having a sort of a lukewarm response to what our brand represented was just not okay. And so we made the decision that we're going to overhaul the marks, and that's always risky because people are connected and tied to marks. There's emotional buy-in. Ironically, I was talking to someone who had been here on campus 20 years ago when they launched the previous mark, which was called the C-pick. It was a C that looked like an arm swinging a pickaxe, and it had 49ers inside of the C-pick. And he told me that when they launched the C-pick, that there were a lot of constituents who hated it, didn't like the mark at all. And of course, over the course of time, it grew on people. And I've been through this at Florida when we launched the Gatorhead logo, which everybody knows now as the Florida Gators. And we launched that back in 1994, I believe it was. And there was a faction of Gator fans that absolutely hated it, and I think if we'd had social media around at the time, who knows if it would have even survived, but it did. And now, of course, it's the mark. So, we were very careful and thoughtful in involving a local firm here. We did not want to go hire an agency out of, New York or Atlanta or somewhere. It needed to have Charlotte roots to try to understand our institution. Involved, a lot of different people, including especially our student athletes and our coaches in the process. And beautifully enough for us, the lead creative person at the local firm, Luke Wire George Andrews, happened to be a graduate, whose parents worked at Charlotte. He graduated from Charlotte. Todd Aldridge is his name. And then he had two children who graduated from Charlotte or who were in school. So he had unbelievable passion for this place. And it wasn't just some random firm that was going to come up with a clever new logo. It was someone who really cared about the outcome in a way that you can't manufacture. And, he was able to, in the end, develop a mark that we all felt was the right one. And that is the block C with the pickaxe inside forming the letter C. And as a secondary mark, we created that C pick, that all NC, we call it, with the LT to form CLT for Charlotte as a secondary mark. And, when we launched it, it was, I would say, very well received for a new mark. There was absolutely a segment of fans who did not like it because it was changed, or they just didn't care for it. And we knew that going into it. But then there were a lot of fans and supporters who loved it, loved the new look, loved the feel. And honestly, the feedback we got from people across the country was extremely positive. We got tremendous feedback and excitement about the rebrand. And I would say over the course of time, as fans have seen it implemented on uniforms at our facilities, on the basketball court. It's been really quickly accepted, and I couldn't be more pleased with it. I think it's been a huge hit for us. It's going to really, I think, help advance our brand and what we're trying to accomplish here with the 49ers.
Yeah, we spoke before I hit record that my wife works in aviation. So I actually remember when you all released this, I showed it to her and I was like, is this the airport code for Charlotte? And I just think it's genius to do that. But I also just thinking about that alum that was able to help with the redesign and the brand assessment. You mentioned passion. That just also seems to protect you all against it, that you don't have to worry about, like, this person is 100% in on this project. So they are an all-in C, I guess you could say, that they're a family of Charlotte. So that's incredible that you did local too. And because it seems like there's a couple of firms lately that have been doing all the rebranding, which is fine. But the fact that you were able to find Charlotte company-based regional company with alums is incredible. We talked also about just the decision of when you were going to release the brand because of COVID. Can you kind of walk us through that decision process once you realized the pandemic was coming and you had already made purchases?
So we had finalized the rebrand, and our intent was to launch it in May. We had, because of the lead time you have to provide Nike to produce uniforms, we had already submitted all of our artwork for all of our teams and their uniforms back in January, February of 20, and knew that we were going to launch in May. Well, then the pandemic struck, and quite frankly, we weren't really sure what to do. We weren't sure if it felt right, at this time of sort of unprecedented crisis, to roll out a new brand when everybody's quarantining at home and everybody's anxious and not understanding the world we live in. And so we paused it. We weren't pausing the rebrand per se, in that the uniforms were ordered and it was happening for 2020. But we're trying to figure out what was best for the timing of it. So instead of launching it in May, we thought we would push it back to August, closer to the start of the fall season. But then over the course of the next few weeks, we noticed there were some NFL teams and a couple of other institutions who launched their own rebrands. And we felt like, okay, maybe it is okay to do this now, because quite frankly, no games are being played and fans are starving for something, related to their passion. And so we decided to push it back up into June, and we launched it in June. So we were a little all over the place because of the pandemic, but in the end, it worked out beautifully, and it gave us the lead time we needed for our uniforms and our facility upgrades and renovations as we put the new marks in the facilities.
People might not realize how many marks you have to change. I imagine that's, for one, a lot of money and effort, but it just seems like that would be maybe one thing people forget, is how you realize maybe how often you see your mark everywhere across campus.
It is everywhere, and just when you think you're done, you're not. You find it somewhere else. We knew we weren't going to be able to replace every single mark in year one. The priorities were the highest visibility locations, and so for the most part, that's been accomplished. The one exception we made was we were going to replace our turf football field in time for the 2020 season. When the pandemic struck, we decided to pause for a year, really just out of consideration for the finances of it. It's about a $600,000 or $700,000 investment. We had the money appropriated. It's in an account to be used, but we felt like we could probably stretch one more season. The field needed to be replaced anyway. It usually has 10 years of life. We're approaching year 10 now, so the time is right. But we waited one more year, and that'll be completed next fall. So then you'll see our basketball court is done. It was already due for a resurface. Baseball is close to being finished. Softball, tennis, track and soccer. We're close, and we'll get there here very, very soon.
The basketball court looks great, and hopefully you'll have a full season in fall 2021 of football, and you can showcase it even more, and kind of just to hit the reset button on the whole year, if we have a normal fall. Well, the last thing I want to talk to you about is about another area that I'm researching that's going to be my continued interest. I'm at and have been a part of larger institutions that are part of campus systems. And this isn't UNC specific, because quite frankly, it's such a large system that I don't know that these questions would be as feasible. But I'm researching these institutions and thinking about the implications for budgets and everything after COVID, and how maybe we can be more innovative and collaborative with our athletic departments that are part of a system. So the institutions are always collaborative, or at least sometimes there's a little bit of maybe a faculty disagreement between the campuses. But as far as administration and governance, usually it's pretty much the same team, same board of trustees, things like that. Athletic departments are a little different story because they are clearly different. There's a competitive nature there as well. But could you ever see a day in college athletics where a branch campus of an athletic department gets a better apparel contract, or maybe additional buying power, whether it's software or equipment purchases, through being associated with that maybe bigger campus that's maybe a Power 5 institution, based on that attachment and that relationship and having the same board? Because it seems like that could really, a dime in the bucket, help the branch campus with resources after COVID.
Well, I think, the way we look at it is, and every state system is different, and so you have flagship institutions, you have branch campuses, et cetera. For example, Penn State, I know, has a ton of branch campuses that are Penn State hyphen, right? The situation here is that, we're all part of the UNC system. So UNC-Charlotte is not, for example, a branch campus of UNC-Chapel Hill. Just the way NC State is not, the way App State is not, the way Wilmington and ECU and Greensboro and Asheville, so I think that, it's probably unlikely that you would see any sort of residual benefit because of, let's just say, Chapel Hill, Carolina's in the ACC, and obviously a really strong college athletic brand, that somehow UNC Charlotte would benefit from that. But I do believe where we benefit is that we've got great relationships in the state. Bubba Cunningham at North Carolina, Doug Gillen at App State, Boo Corrigan at NC State, John Gilbert at ECU, on and on and on. Janet Cohn at UNC Asheville. We've had quarterly calls amongst the ADs in the UNC system. Then I give a lot of credit to Janet Cohn at Asheville and Bubba at UNC Chapel Hill for pulling those calls together. And every school in the system that has an athletic department has been on those calls. We've talked about ways that we're sort of the things that we're doing to combat the pandemic that we're in, all the issues that we're facing. And there has been a commitment to try to play each other more, out of conference, feeling like there are opportunities to play one another. And I think that actually is very appealing to schools like the Tar Heels and the Wolfpack, et cetera, who maybe normally would have played, more out of the region, non-conference games. Now, why not play Charlotte? Why not play Greensboro? Why not play App or ECU right down the road? It's easy. It's a bus trip. And I think college athletics in general is taking a look at how it operates right now and says, why are we doing some of the things that we're doing? Why do we jump on a plane when there's a school that's an hour and a half away? We could get on a bus and go play, And so to me, yes, there are benefits for sure to Charlotte for being in a system that includes North Carolina and NC State and some of these other programs. I don't necessarily see it as a potential benefit to maybe help us with an equipment deal, an apparel deal per se. But I think that, the relationships matter. They really do. Like, we're very fortunate. We've got a home and home in football scheduled with North Carolina. They're going to come play us here on our campus. We've only been playing football for 8 years. Bubba didn't have to do that. And so, the same is true. We signed a deal here recently with NC State. They're going to play us straight up home and home. So I think that you're going to see more of that sort of cooperation because it just makes all the sense in the world.
That's great to hear the quarterly calls, because I was reading a dissertation from the 80s the other day that someone studied athletic department branch campuses across the country, and it seems like it used to be where there would be more of a communication line between all the athletic departments. And some of them even had one athletic director, kind of like a president chancellor system, overseeing all the athletic departments. And I just laughed because I was like, that's not happening ever again. But it was interesting to read about. So hearing those quarterly calls, hopefully that's something that keeps up after the pandemic too, so you can just keep that relationship open. It sounds like it's going to make some great game day experiences for your student athletes and your fans and students as well.
Absolutely. We've got some really talented, smart, good people in this state. Kim Record is another one at Greensboro. And I mean, we're really, really fortunate to have the talent we have in our state leading these athletic programs. I'm dragging them down a little bit, but they're tolerating me. But it's fun to be a part of that group and to be able to bounce ideas off of each other. I mean, because let's face it, none of us have gone through something like this before. And so there's power in numbers, and there's no pride of authorship as we try to get through it together.
I've heard great things from many people about Bubba Cunningham, and really might need to get him on the podcast at some point, but it's just been people from all different areas of higher education outside the system that have told me great things. So it's great to hear as well, and all the other leaders in the system. So Mike, I just want to thank you again for being on the Higher Athletics podcast and being generous with your time. People that are watching this can see the great CLT logo on your shirt, and then also on your Zoom background. I need to set my Zoom background game up a little bit, but I really appreciate the time. I know it's a busy time, and I think that people are going to learn a lot from this. I know I'm always selfish about my podcast. It's the audience is very important, but I always love being able to ask the questions that can help me in my career too. So I'm very thankful for you for agreeing to be a part of this.
Well, I appreciate it, Travis. You asked some fantastic questions. I've done a few of these, and quite honestly, I feel like your questions were probably the most well considered that I've had so far in a podcast. So well done, and good luck to you, and thanks for having me on.